All right, guys, we're going to get started. I'm not going to stand in the middle of the screen. Welcome to the Thoroughbred Aftercare Summit. My name is Jen Royts. I'm the Executive Director of the Retired Racehorse Project. Today we've got as many as anyone can count in this room, and we've also got a bunch of people watching virtually. So we've got a camera right here. I'm going to kind of go over a little bit of housekeeping, then we'll get started. If you guys have questions during the presentation, we'll have to get you a microphone so you can speak into the mic so the virtual audience will be able to hear your questions as well. And for all of our panelists, when you come up here, if you can please speak into the microphone, and that way we can capture your every word. Between each panel, we're going to draw for door prizes, and if there's anything that you would like to see on next year's panel, please let us know. All of the topics for this year's panel were taken from the feedback we got last year, and we'll do the same thing for next year, hopefully. So with that, I will hand it over to Stacy to introduce our first panelist.
Thanks, Jen. Can everyone hear me okay? Turn the mic on. There you go. That's better. Everyone's nodding. Yes, I can hear you, but the mic's not on. You guys are too kind. I'm Stacy. I'm from the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, and we're here today to support the RRP, which is just a great event, really showcases the Thoroughbred, and we just love being a participant in some factor every year. With me today is Matt Thacker, and you might know with the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, what we do is accredit and fundraise. And so part of the accreditation process is that we need to have good due diligence on your finances. And that's sort of a learning curve. In the beginning, we were just happy to if you had 990s, if you filed them, that was great. And as time has gone on, we've really required more and more financial information. It helps us and it helps you. And so without going into it too much, because it's not my forte, everything I've learned about finance and aftercare I've learned at the TA, and really it's really been heightened since Matt has come on board with us. Matt is our financial and our data manager for the TAA, and he has a lot of innovative ideas that really help us see what is important to get out there for your financial reporting and how to tell your best story and how to plan for your best story in your whatever equine, even if you're not a charity, even if you're just a financial, if you're a farm or a retraining program. So I'm going to probably go sit with you guys and let Matt walk you through this. I do want to say, you know, the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance door is always open. If today you heard tidbits, you had a curiosity, you're not comfortable asking the questions here, then by all means, go on our website, find us, reach out to us. We're happy to help, and we're here for you and your thoroughbreds. So this is Matt.
Thank you. Everybody can hear me okay? All right, so I speak pretty lowly, so just let me know if you can't hear. So, case in point. So thank you for the invitation to speak. It's not often that accountants get asked to speak at these kinds of things, especially first. So do we have the slides up?
Can you see the table? Do you want to sit here? Not because you can probably see that. Why don't you sit here because you can see the screen?
All right. Oh, no, it's all right. What do I push? Perfect. All right, so the main thing that I want to talk about today is, or the purpose of this talk is getting your financials in order to apply for accreditation to the TAA. But like Stacy said, there's more to just having your finances in order than just applying to the TAA. You really want them to be the best reflection of your organization as possible. So my hope is to give a more broader exposure to FASB, the Financial Accounting Standards Boards. They're the ones that set GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. And so that's what hopefully we can learn about today. So what do you need in order to apply? So, sorry, I'm going to step back. So title of this presentation is 5 Steps to Getting Your Finances in Order. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what do you need to apply for accreditation? Then we're going to talk about what purposes your financial statements actually serve, the best practices and how to prepare them, how your external stakeholders and people who view your finances, like what they take away from them. And finally, some red flags when we're reviewing finances and how to fix them. So the first thing that you need to apply with TAA for accreditation is your previous year's 990s. Secondly, your previous year financial statements. So FASB calls your financial statements for nonprofits and profits different things. So you'll hear me use statement of activities and P&L interchangeably, balance sheet and statement of financial position interchangeably, and statement of cash flow. So I have a slide up here that will explain all of those. But those 3 compile your financial statements. Third is your statement of functional expenses. That's just an extension of your 990s. Your current year approved budget, and then your current year financial statements. One thing I will note on here is that a lot of people file extensions with the IRS for their 990s for additional time. Any extension that is granted by the IRS, that does not change when the application or when the 990 is due to the TAA, which is August 15th. Next, what's the purpose of financial statements? So FASB is pretty clear in when it kind of gives a general purpose of what your financial statements are used for. They should tell the story of your organization. Your financial statements should convey what the purpose of your mission is, how well you're going to be able to continue to do your mission, and if you're managing your money well. So I have the technical FASB language up there. So FASB 958 deals with everything not for profit. So that's a very technical definition, but what does it actually mean? So before I move on to the next slide, I want to give you some just statistics. I didn't want to include these because they alone don't tell the story entirely. But as of 2020, there were 1.7 million nonprofits in the US. So that works out to be about 1 nonprofit for every 72 households in America. Of that, 43,000 or 2.6% of those are animal welfare nonprofits. And they make up about the proportion of revenue raised in 2020. Yeah, it's about 2.6% of overall giving, which is about $40 million, give or take. Sorry, I'm saying a lot. Oh, the median annual revenue for an animal welfare nonprofit was $105,000. So I say all that. The reason I said I didn't want to display those numbers is because that doesn't display the overall trend of what's happening with nonprofits. Despite COVID last year, nonprofit giving is actually up across all industries. Animal welfare is actually up 12%, and is up 6.5% year to date in 2021. So those numbers don't paint the overall picture that I just gave you, but what they do tell you is that as a nonprofit, you're competing against a lot of nonprofits for scarce resources. And so the most important part of your financials are to tell a story. So I did a quick Google search this morning, and there's about the first the first 6 pages on nonprofit, if you search any given nonprofit, the first 6 pages on Google will return that agency's 990s. You don't have control of how people view your finances. You're not there to tell your story whenever somebody's sitting there reviewing your 990s or your P&L or your balance sheet. So it's important to have well-constructed financial statements so they tell your story, so that your story and your message is crafted into the structure of your financial statements. So best practices for preparing your financial statements. So like I said earlier, your financial statements consist of your statement of financial position, your statement of activities, and your statement of cash flow. And they all work intertwined. That's why I put that illustration up there, because they work in sequence. They all complement each other. So I know this is probably hard to see, but I put together what a good financial statement, and this is a statement of financial position, because they should all mirror each other. So this would be an ideal balance sheet or financial position. You can see that there's 2 categories, or you have your GL codes, your general ledger codes on the far left, and then you have your assets and liabilities broken out by those with restrictions and those without restrictions. That's the bare minimum that FASB requires for recording your financial statements, those with and without donor restrictions. So what I see a lot of times are those on top of each other, and it's very hard for somebody to pick out what exactly your business looks like or how much of your money is controlled by donor restrictions when they're layered on top of each other. So it's best practice to put them side by side. So you can easily go down the line, look at everything that's without donor restrictions, everything that's with donor restrictions, and then the overall structure of the business. Second, another best practice that's recommended by FASB is grouping everything in liked. I think the term that's used in FASB language is homogeneous categories. So you want everything, you want your assets to be up top, you want your liabilities to be below, and then net income below that. But you want them to be grouped together in a way that makes logical sense, and you want them in a degree of liquidity, meaning how easy is it to access the money. You want your short-term or your current assets on top, and then your long-term. So that way we can see how much of your assets are tied up into your fixed assets, which means they aren't very liquid, or how much cash you have on a regular basis. So what I did with the 4 squares, and this will be a point of a couple slides going forward, is a couple of the equations that I look at when I'm reviewing financials of really any organization. So you have your current ratio, which is your current assets over current liabilities. So you don't take into account long-term debt or long-term assets. Days of cash on hand, and then I can't see that far one, but we'll cover it in just a second. So this is a not necessarily good financial statement, and I see a lot of these. I've been in the nonprofit finance sector for about 10 years. And this is pretty commonplace. This doesn't tell you anything. I see a lot that have just bank account 1, bank account 2. From that, you can't take any information of where they hold their funds. Are they investment accounts? Are they endowment accounts? What's going on with that? Where are they getting their money from? And then there's nothing accrued. There's no receivables, there's no payables, and I don't know any functioning business that doesn't have any payables. That just means you're either not in operation, or you're not following generally accepted accounting principles. Also, this is also a poor reflection of your financial statements, because as the one before, this is understating your organization's total value by about $130,000, because you're not accurately capturing everything that should be captured on your financial statements. Next. So external stakeholders, especially those of your big donors, are going to look at pretty much the same thing. A lot of the equations that I just carried, they're really all ratios. Your current ratio, again, is your current assets over your current liabilities, and your days of cash on hand. That is how much cash you currently have divided by your annual cash requirement divided by 365. That will give you how many days of operating cash that you have at any given point in time. Debt to equity ratio. So again, that's current liabilities and current income. And that's why it's important to break out your current and long-term assets and liabilities, and those with donor restrictions and those without, because a lot of these equations of how you operate your business are done from, one, the current perspective, and two, without donor restrictions, because there's not a lot that you can do in terms of operating equity for funds with donor restrictions. They're tied up for a single purpose. And then your income to expense ratio. So the difficult thing with dealing with these is that there's no good number. There's no benchmark for what these numbers should be across nonprofits. But again, it goes back to telling your story. So the last one, it's not an equation, but it's what your organization shows. It's the story that it tells about the investment that you make within your organization. So starting in the I'd say the mid 90s into the early 2010s, there was really this rush, or there was really this perception of nonprofits. They created a rush to the bottom, is what they call it. So it was a point of pride for nonprofits to spend pennies on the dollar to run their organization. And the vast majority of organizations or nonprofits that go out of business within the first 10 years. And that's primarily because the lack of investment into the organization. So I'd say within the past 5 to 10 years, there's been really this shift among major donors into how they view nonprofits. It's no longer those that spend 5 cents for every dollar given on administrative costs, but what's the value of that 5 cents? Are you putting in long-term investment to your organization to have a sustainable future? Are you investing in the infrastructure for your organization to get the best people to do the best work? So, and that's not something that is told through those other ratios. That's really just how you display your financials. And when your financials are rolled up and just aggregated at a very high level, you don't get that sort of detail. You don't see what assets they're holding on to. You don't see where they're investing their money, and you don't see where people are investing in them. So just another quick statistic. There was a survey that came out at the end of last year that surveyed about 40,000 nonprofits. About 25% of them had more than 6 months of operating cash on hand. About 10% had less than 30 days of operating cash on hand, and the rest of them fall between that Um, so, it's a very telling story of how you're investing. And then finally, red flags and how to fix them. These are just some of the things that I kind of look for when I'm reviewing financials is high revenue concentration. Where are you, if all of your money is coming from one source, or if 90% of your revenue is coming from one source, a lot of nonprofits that shut down during COVID were highly revenue concentrated. The best way to get out of that is diversify. I know that's not really, I was kind of really stuck on when I said how to fix them because there's not really a good tip on how to diversify your income, but there are a lot of revenue streams, a lot of donors, and a lot of opportunities for nonprofits to grow. Like I said earlier, there's the nonprofit revenue for 2020. This was brand new revenue donated, was just under $500 billion. So there's a lot of room for expansion and diversification. Second, financial statements do not follow GAAP standards. This is kind of a quintessential. It's easy for a nonprofit to, especially the smaller ones, to kind of shy away from really getting into or investing into the best accounting practices because one, they can't afford it, or they don't have the skill set on site, or whatnot. But it's really at a detriment to them. Investing in complying with overall FASB standards is really a long-term investment into your organization. One, you have to be GAAP compliant in order to receive any sort of state or federal monies. So that's a huge one. And then depending on that, you have certain audits that you have to pass. But again, diversification of your funds. Third, unrestricted net asset deficit. So essentially, if you're running on negatives, if you have more current debt than you have assets, that's going to be a major red flag. But a lot of that is just not applying your generally accepted accounting principles. You're not accruing the revenue or recognizing the revenue when they should be recognizing it, and you're not spreading your or you're recognizing expenses too early. That's a huge issue that I see for a lot of nonprofits is they're eating the cost of things that should be fixed assets or prepaid expenses. You're eating all of that cost up front and not spreading that out across your fiscal year, which makes your balance sheet look better. And then finally, current liabilities exceed current assets. Again, it goes back to how you're preparing your financial statements and properly following GAAP standards. And so with that, I believe is all.
All right, do we have any questions from anyone? Or maybe any questions on Zoom? I'll get Bev first, and then if you can keep your eye on this Zoom.
Is this going to be available to our organizations?
Yes, and I actually have a handout that
I can pass that handout out. I just got it.
Yeah.
Ryan's ahead of me.
I have a handout that I also put together for kind of the top FASB guidelines, and then what they mean in plain English. So yes, I
Yeah, I think that'd be great. For those on the webcast, Beth was just saying she'll scan those and put them out to all the organizations so they can all get mouse notes from this. Anybody else have any questions? We will. Yeah, we're recording this.
Check, 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 check. Check, check, check.
All right, since my microphone is working a lot better now, huh? For those who are on Zoom, what we were talking about before, Matt put together a fantastic handout for everyone here, and we'll make that available as well as a recording of this available afterward. Those were really great tips. Thank you so much for doing that for us.